Alarms scream through the corridor before I even open my eyes. The floor is tilted, sparks are raining from a torn ceiling panel, and someone is shouting my name over the comm. I push myself up from the wall I was thrown against and taste copper in my mouth. Ethan, hull breach on deck 3. Get to the escape pods now. That's Captain Voss, and her voice is shaking, which is worse than any alarm. I grab the railing and pull myself down the corridor, boots slipping on debris. The ship shudders again, harder this time, and I hear metal scream somewhere deep in the hull, like the whole vessel is groaning in pain. We were a small survey ship, the Meridian, mapping a quiet stretch of space nobody thought mattered. Then 3 massive shapes dropped out of nowhere and surrounded us like wolves closing on a rabbit. No warning shots, no demand to stand down, just tractor beams locking onto our hull and armored shapes cutting through our airlocks within minutes. I round the corner into the cargo bay and stop cold. 2 of them are already inside. They stand taller than any person I have ever seen, their bodies covered in dark plating that shifts and clicks as they move, like living armor grown straight from bone. Their eyes are too many, clustered in patterns that don't sit right on anything I'd call a face. One of them turns toward me, and I feel it, a pressure behind my eyes, like something is trying to open a door in my skull that was never meant to be opened. I don't wait to find out what that means. I grab a length of pipe from a broken support strut, more out of instinct than any real plan, and back toward the maintenance hatch behind me. The nearest creature raises an arm, and a section of its forearm plating splits open to reveal something glowing and sharp. I duck sideways as heat rushes past my shoulder, so close I smell my own hair singe. I don't have a weapon that means anything against something like that. I have doors, corners, and the 2 working legs God gave me. Ethan, do you copy? Pods are jammed. I repeat, pods are jammed. The captain's voice cracks and then goes silent, replaced by static. I sprint through the hatch and seal it behind me, buying maybe 10 seconds before it's cut open. My chest is heaving, heart slamming so hard I can feel it in my throat. I press my back against a support beam and try to think, but there's no good plan forming. Only the raw animal need to survive the next 30 seconds, and then the 30 after that. The hatch behind me groans, then glows white-hot at the seams. I move. I run through corridors I've walked 100 times in training drills, except now they're filled with smoke and flickering emergency lights, and every one of them might end in a creature waiting to end my life. I hear more of them now, more than 2, moving through the ship with a strange, coordinated silence, like a single mind controlling many hands. Something catches me from behind. Pain rips across my ribs, a line of fire so sudden and total that my vision goes white at the edges. I stumble forward, catch myself on a wall, and look down to see my uniform torn open, a long burn wound running from my shoulder toward my side. Blood is already soaking through the fabric, hot and fast. I should probably scream. Some part of my brain is waiting for me to scream. Instead, everything narrows into a strange, sharp focus, like the pain has been pushed into a small box somewhere at the back of my skull, so the rest of me can keep functioning. I keep running. Behind me, I hear one of the creatures make a sound, something between a click and a low rumble, and I realize with a cold, distant kind of clarity that it isn't chasing me the way a predator chases prey in a panic. It's hurting me, steering me towards something. I burst through a set of doors into the shuttle bay and find it already full of them, at least 6 of the tall armored shapes standing in a loose circle, and in the center of that circle, kneeling with her hands bound behind her back, is Captain Voss. Her face is pale, a cut above her eyebrow dripping blood onto the deck, but her eyes are still burning with defiance. "No," she says the moment she sees me. "Ethan, don't." One of them steps toward me before she can finish, and I raise the pipe on pure reflex, knowing full well it will do nothing. The creature doesn't even bother swinging at me. It simply reaches out with one long arm, faster than I can track, and grips my wrist hard enough that I hear something in my forearm crack. I don't drop the pipe because I choose to. I drop it because my hand stops obeying me. They force me down beside the captain, and for a moment there's nothing but the sound of my own ragged breathing and the low, clicking murmur of the creatures speaking to each other in a language built from sounds no human throat could make. One of them, taller than the others, with plating patterned in deep violet instead of black, steps closer and looks down at me. Not at my face, at my wound. It tilts its head, and I feel that same pressure behind my eyes again, stronger this time, like it's reading something written on the inside of my skull. Interesting, it says, and the word comes out of a small device on its chest, flat and mechanical, but the creature's many eyes stay fixed on the blood soaking through my uniform. This one is still standing. Another creature approaches, kneels slightly, and passes something like a wand over my ribs. A thin blue light traces along my wound, and I watch its posture change, a subtle stiffening that even an alien body can't hide. It says something in its own language, low and fast, and the first creature's head tilts further. "Captain, what did it just say?" My voice comes out steadier than I expect, though my whole body has started to shake. She doesn't answer. She's staring at the creatures now too, something like disbelief crossing her bloodied face. The violet-plated one crouches in front of me, close enough now that I can see fine cracks and scars across its armor plating, evidence of battles I can't begin to imagine. It reaches toward my wound, not touching it, just hovering a clawed hand a few inches above the torn fabric and blood. "Your kind should not be conscious," it says through the device on its chest. "Your kind should not be standing." I don't know what to say to that, so I say nothing. Just hold its strange, layered gaze and try not to let my breathing give away how close I am to falling apart. It straightens up and turns to the others, speaking rapidly, and though I can't understand a single word, I understand the tone. It's the tone of someone who just found something they didn't expect, and isn't sure whether to be excited or afraid. Two of the smaller creatures step forward and haul me to my feet. My legs almost give out, but I lock my knees and force myself to stay upright, refusing to let them see me collapse. The captain is pulled up beside me, and for a brief moment her eyes meet mine, full of fear not for herself, but for what might happen to me now that I've caught their attention. "They're taking prisoners," she whispers, voice barely audible. "That's good. It means they want something from us." "What do they want from me?" I whisper back, glancing down at the wound still bleeding freely down my side. She doesn't answer, because at that moment the violet one turns back toward us, and this time it's looking only at me. "You will be brought before the Queen," it says, the mechanical voice flattening the words into something almost gentle, almost curious. "She will want to see this for herself." "See what?" I ask, though some cold, quiet part of me already suspects the answer has everything to do with the blood soaking through my shirt, and the fact that I am still on my feet at all. The creature doesn't answer. It simply gestures, and two more of them step forward to bind my hands, careful, almost gentle, the way you might handle something valuable and unknown. They march me and the captain through the shuttle bay, toward the yawning black opening of a boarding tube connecting our ship to something enormous and dark, waiting silently in space beyond our hull. As we're pushed forward, I catch one last look back at the meridian, smoke pouring from ruptured sections, emergency lights flashing uselessly against the dark, my ship, my crew, my entire understanding of what waited for us out among the stars, all of it collapsing in the space of a few violent minutes. The pain in my side pulses with every step, sharp and insistent, but strangely it doesn't slow me down the way I expect it to. If anything, it sharpens everything else, makes the corridor around me feel more real, more urgent, more survivable. My mind keeps circling back to the creature's words. "Your kind should not be standing." I don't know what that means yet, not really. But as they lead me through the tube and into the belly of a ship built by beings who have clearly conquered more worlds than I can count, I have the growing, uneasy feeling that I am about to become something more than a captured prisoner. I am about to become a question they cannot answer. The tube seals behind us with a heavy metallic hiss, and the last light from the meridian disappears, swallowed by darkness and distance. Ahead of us stretches a corridor, unlike anything built by human hands, walls that seem to breathe with faint bioluminescent light, ceilings so high they vanish into shadow above. I glance at the wound on my side one more time, watching the blood slow to a sluggish trickle, despite the fact that no one has treated it, despite the fact that by every rule I understand about the human body, I should be in agonizing shock right now. Instead, I keep walking. Behind me, one of the smaller creatures murmurs something to another, and though I can't understand the words, I catch the tone again, that same uneasy blend of curiosity and something close to alarm. Whatever is waiting for me at the end of this corridor, it seems I am about to give someone a very unpleasant surprise. The corridor opens into a chamber so vast it steals the breath from my lungs. Curved walls rise hundreds of feet above me, lined with strange glowing veins of blue and violet light that pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. The air smells faintly sweet, chemical, unfamiliar. Rows of armored guards line a path leading toward a raised platform at the far end of the room, and standing there, waiting, is a shape unlike anything I've seen since I was dragged off my ship. She is enormous. Twice the height of the creatures who captured me, her body draped in layers of dark, glistening plating that shifts with each small movement, catching the light in ways that remind me uncomfortably of an insect's shell. Her head is crowned with curved ridges that sweep back like a headdress grown from bone, and dozens of small, glowing eyes track my every step as the guards march me closer. This has to be the Queen. My wound throbs with every step, sending sharp pulses of pain up through my ribs and shoulder, but I refuse to let my legs shake. Beside me, Captain Voss walks with her jaw clenched tight, blood still dried along her eyebrow, refusing to look anywhere but straight ahead. The guards stop us a good 20 feet from the platform and force us both down onto our knees. I grit my teeth against the fresh spike of pain that shoots through my side as I hit the floor, but I don't cry out. I won't give them that. The Queen studies us in silence for a long moment, her many small eyes moving slowly over my face, my posture, my bound hands. When she finally speaks, her voice comes not from any device, but seems to press directly into my mind, deep and resonant, layered with something that might be curiosity. So these are the humans my scouts have found. Her gaze drifts down to my side, to the blood-soaked fabric of my uniform, and something in her expression shifts, though I can't quite read what. This one is injured, she says, and there's an edge of something almost like disapproval in her tone, as she glances at the guards flanking me. Why was this not treated? One of the guards, the violet-plated one from the shuttle bay, steps forward and speaks rapidly in their clicking language. The Queen listens, and as she does, her posture changes, just slightly, a subtle stillness settling over her massive frame. "Bring him closer," she says finally, and her attention fixes entirely on me now, ignoring the captain completely. I wish to see for myself. Two guards haul me up by the arms and drag me forward until I'm standing directly before the platform, close enough now to see the fine, intricate patterns etched into the Queen's armor plating, close enough to feel the strange pressure of her attention pressing against the inside of my skull, like she's trying to read my thoughts the way you'd read a book left open on a table. She leans down slightly, several of her eyes narrowing, as she studies the wound along my ribs. It's an ugly sight, a long burn wound, crusted with drying blood, the edges of my torn uniform stiff with it. By any measure I understand, I should be pale, shaking, barely conscious from blood loss and shock. Instead, I stand there, breathing hard but steady, meeting the gaze of a creature who has probably conquered 100 worlds before mine. "How long ago was this wound inflicted?" she asks, and this time the question is directed not at me, but at the guard beside her. "Less than one full rotation cycle, my Queen," the guard answers, its mechanical translator flattening the words. "He has received no treatment, no medication, no stabilization." The Queen's eyes narrow further, and she leans down even closer, close enough now that I can feel a faint heat radiating off her armored body, or maybe that's just my own fear playing tricks on me. "Impossible," she murmurs, and this time, the word carries a weight that makes even the guards around her go still. A wound of this severity, left untreated for this long, in a species with a physiology this delicate, should have already resulted in collapse, unconsciousness, death, within a matter of hours. I don't know what to say to that, so again, I say nothing, just hold her strange, layered gaze, and try to keep my breathing steady, try not to let the pain pulling at my side show on my face. She straightens up, turning to address the small crowd of advisors and guards gathered around the platform. "Bring the medical scanners," she orders. "I want a full reading, now." There's a flurry of movement as several smaller creatures, these ones wearing lighter, more delicate armor, covered in small instruments and devices, hurry forward. One of them approaches me carefully, almost hesitantly, holding a device that hums softly as it passes over my body. I watch its many eyes flicker rapidly as data streams across a small screen embedded in its forearm. Its posture stiffens the longer it scans, and I notice the murmurs starting among the gathered advisors, low and uneasy, spreading through the chamber like ripples across water. "What is it showing you?" the Queen asks, and though her voice remains steady, I catch something new in it now. Not quite fear, not yet, but something close to it. The scientist creature hesitates before answering, its eyes flicking nervously between the Queen and the readout on its arm. "My Queen," it says slowly. His body is already responding to the wound. Clotting has accelerated far beyond expected parameters for a species of this size and structure. There are elevated markers consistent with what I believe is a defensive chemical response, something akin to what we would call a stress hormone, but far more potent. His internal temperature has risen as well, likely to combat potential infection before it has even taken hold. The Queen's many eyes fix on me with new intensity, and for the first time since I was dragged into this chamber, I see something flicker across her alien features that I can only describe as unease. "You are saying," she says slowly, each word deliberate, "that this creature's body began fighting the wound itself, without any external intervention, within moments of injury?" "That is correct, my Queen," the scientist replies. A heavy silence falls over the chamber, broken only by the low hum of the walls and the distant clicking murmur of guards whispering among themselves. I stand there, blood still drying along my side, and realize with a strange, distant sense of unreality that every single creature in this massive room is now staring at me like I am something they have never encountered before. Captain Voss, still kneeling behind me, lets out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding. When I glance back at her, her expression has shifted from fear to something sharper, more calculating, like she's just realized we might have more leverage here than either of us understood a few minutes ago. The Queen descends a step from her platform, moving with a slow, deliberate grace despite her massive size, until she's standing directly in front of me, towering over me by several feet. Her many eyes move slowly across my face, my posture, the wound at my side, cataloging every detail with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. "Tell me, human," she says, her voice pressing into my mind with new weight. "Does this happen to all of your kind, or are you simply unusual among your species?" I hesitate, aware that whatever I say next might matter more than anything I've said since I was dragged off my ship. I think of the captain's warning glance, of the way the room has gone utterly silent waiting for my answer, of the strange, dawning realization spreading across the faces of every creature gathered here. "I'm nothing special," I say finally, keeping my voice as steady and even as I can manage, despite the pain still radiating from my side. "Where I come from, this is just what happens when you get hurt." The words land in the chamber like a stone dropped into still water, and I watch the ripple of reaction spread outward from the Queen through every guard, every advisor, every scientist gathered in that vast, glowing hall. For the first time since this nightmare began, I see something on the Queen's face that I recognize instantly, despite how alien her features are, despite how impossible it should be for me to read any emotion on a creature built so differently from anything I've ever known. I see doubt. I see the first crack in the absolute, unquestioned power she clearly wields over every other species she has ever encountered. And somewhere beneath the pain and the fear and the exhaustion pulling at every part of my battered body, a small, sharp part of me recognizes that doubt for exactly what it is: an opportunity. The Queen doesn't move for a long moment, her many eyes still fixed on me, searching my face for any hint that I might be lying, that this might be some kind of trick or bluff meant to buy time or mercy. Whatever she's looking for, she doesn't seem to find it, and that uncertainty seems to unsettle her more than any answer I could have given. "Take him to the examination chamber," she says finally, turning away and ascending back toward her platform, though I notice the tension still lingering in her posture, the careful way her guards now watch me as they move to escort me forward. "I want a complete study, every reading, every detail." She pauses at the top of the platform, looking back over her shoulder at me one last time, and when she speaks again, her voice carries something I never expected to hear from a being who commands an empire built on conquest. "If what I am seeing is true," she says quietly, almost to herself, "then everything we believed about your kind may be wrong." The guards pull me forward, back through the towering chamber and down a new corridor branching off from the main hall. And as the massive doors close behind us, sealing the Queen and her platform from view, I catch one last glimpse of Captain Voss watching me go, her expression a careful mixture of fear and something that might be hope. My side throbs with every step, the pain a constant, grinding reminder of just how close I came to not surviving that first attack. But beneath the pain, something else is building now, something I haven't felt since the moment the alarms first tore me from sleep aboard the Meridian. For the first time since this nightmare began, I don't feel like prey being led to slaughter. I feel like a puzzle they're afraid to solve. The examination chamber is colder than the throne hall, its walls lined with strange humming devices and thin glowing tubes that snake along the ceiling like veins of light. I'm strapped to a raised metal table, my wrists and ankles bound with restraints that feel far too gentle for what I expected, almost as if they're worried about hurting me rather than keeping me contained. Around me, half a dozen of the smaller, lighter-armored scientist creatures move with quick, efficient motions, murmuring to one another in their clicking language while devices hover and scan across my body. My wound has finally been cleaned, though not treated in any way I recognize, just wiped free of dried blood so they can study it more clearly, the edges of torn skin, exposed under the harsh blue light. I try to steady my breathing, try to focus on anything other than the sharp ache pulling through my ribs every time I shift even slightly against the restraints. Above me, a large curved screen flickers to life, filled with strange symbols and shifting diagrams that mean nothing to me, but clearly mean a great deal to the creatures studying them. One of the scientists, smaller than the others with faintly silver-tinted plating, leans close to examine my wound directly, its many eyes narrowing as it studies the edges of torn skin. It speaks without looking away, its voice translated by a small device clipped near its throat. The bleeding has slowed significantly since initial capture, it says, more to itself than to me. Clot formation is already advanced beyond what I would expect even with medical intervention. Another scientist steps forward, holding a thin instrument that glows faintly at its tip. Body temperature has risen nearly 2 degrees since the last reading, it reports. Immune markers are elevated well beyond baseline. I lie there, forcing myself to breathe slowly, and listen to them discuss my body like I'm some kind of malfunctioning machine they're trying to diagnose, rather than a person who nearly died a few hours ago. It's unsettling, being talked about instead of talked to, but there's also something strangely useful about it. They're not hiding anything from me. They think I can't understand them, or maybe they simply don't care if I do. Either way, I'm learning things about myself that I never had reason to think about before. The doors at the far end of the chamber slide open, and the low murmur of conversation cuts off instantly as every scientist in the room straightens, turning toward the entrance. The Queen enters, her massive frame ducking slightly to clear the doorway, followed by 2 guards and the violet-plated commander from earlier. She moves to stand beside the table, looking down at me with those many small, glowing eyes, and I notice immediately that something about her posture has changed since the throne room. She's more careful now, more deliberate in her movements, like someone approaching a creature they're no longer entirely sure is harmless. "Report," she says, her attention fixed on the silver-plated scientist who seems to be leading the examination. The scientist steps forward, gesturing toward the screen above me, where new symbols and diagrams continue to shift and update in real time. "My Queen, what we are observing defies every model we have built for wound response across known species," it says, and I can hear the barely contained excitement in its translated voice, mixed with something more cautious underneath. The subject's body began responding to trauma within seconds of injury. Blood vessels near the wound constricted almost immediately to limit blood loss. Specialized cells are already forming a protective barrier across the injury site to prevent infection. The Queen's eyes narrow slightly. "This is unusual even by your standards?" "Unprecedented, my Queen," the scientist replies. "Most species we have catalogued require external medical intervention within the first hour following a wound of this severity, or they enter a state of shock that often proves fatal. Some species simply die from wounds far less severe than this one. This human's body appears to be fighting the injury as aggressively and efficiently as any medical technology we possess, and it is doing so entirely on its own." I watch the Queen's expression shift as she processes this, her many eyes moving slowly from the scientist back down to me. studying my face with an intensity that makes it hard to hold her gaze, though I force myself to anyway. "Explain the mechanism," she says. "How is this possible?" The silver scientist hesitates, glancing at its colleagues before answering. "We believe it may be evolutionary, my queen. A trait developed over an extremely long period of environmental pressure." "Elaborate," the queen says, and there's an edge to her voice now, something sharper than simple curiosity. The scientist gestures, and the screen above me shifts, displaying what looks like a rough timeline, long stretches of shifting colors and symbols that I assume represent some kind of evolutionary history, though I can't read any of it myself. "From what limited historical records we have gathered regarding human origins," the scientist continues, "their species evolved on a world with an unusually hostile environment, extreme predation, frequent disease exposure, a long history of conflict, both with other species and within their own. Their bodies appear to have adapted to these constant threats by developing extremely aggressive and efficient survival responses, rapid wound healing, enhanced pain tolerance under stress, elevated adrenal function that allows continued activity even under severe injury." The queen is silent for a long moment, staring down at me with an expression I still can't fully read, though something in the set of her many eyes has shifted into what I can only describe as wariness. "You are telling me," she says slowly, "that this is not some rare mutation. This is simply what humans are." "Based on current data, my queen, that appears to be the case," the scientist replies, and I notice its voice has gone quieter, almost hesitant, as if it too understands the weight of what it's saying. I lie there on the table, listening to them discuss the mechanics of my own survival like it's some kind of frightening discovery, and something about hearing it laid out so clearly, so scientifically, makes it feel more real than it ever has before. I've never thought of myself as tough. I've never thought of myself as anything other than an ordinary person, doing an ordinary job on a survey ship, someone who gets nervous during turbulence and hates the sight of his own blood. But lying here, listening to an alien scientist explain how my body has been quietly waging its own war against a wound that should have killed me hours ago, I start to understand that maybe ordinary, for my species, looks very different than it does for anyone else in this room. The queen leans down closer, her massive frame casting a long shadow across the table, and this time when she speaks, her voice presses directly into my mind again, deep and resonant, carrying a weight that makes my chest tighten. "How does it feel," she asks, "to be injured this badly?" I consider lying, considering downplaying the pain to seem even more unshakable, but something tells me that lying to a creature who can apparently read minds, even partially, might backfire badly. "It hurts," I say honestly, "a lot, but I can still function." "Why?" She presses. "Why does the pain not stop you?" I think about that for a moment, about all the drills and training exercises I went through before ever setting foot on the Meridian, about every story I've ever heard of people surviving impossible situations through sheer stubbornness alone. "Because stopping means dying," I say finally, "and most of us would rather keep moving than give up." The chamber falls silent after that, and I watch the words settle over the gathered creatures like a physical weight. The queen straightens slowly, turning to look at her advisors and scientists, and though she doesn't say anything immediately, I can see something shifting behind her many eyes, some calculation taking place that I don't fully understand yet. "Continue the examination," she says finally, though her voice carries less command now, and more something closer to unease. "I want to know everything, his limits, his thresholds, whether this response is unique to him or common across his entire species." The silver scientist bows slightly and turns back to its instruments, and the room fills once more with the low hum of devices and murmured conversation. But I notice the queen doesn't leave immediately. She remains standing beside the table, watching me, with an intensity that feels less like scientific curiosity now, and more like genuine concern. Over the next stretch of time, the scientists run me through what feels like an endless series of tests. They apply careful pressure to my wound, monitoring my reactions with visible fascination as I grit my teeth and refuse to cry out, despite the fresh waves of pain each test sends through my body. They measure my heart rate, my breathing, the strange chemical markers in my blood that apparently continue climbing the longer the examination continues. At one point, a different scientist approaches with a small device that emits a low electrical pulse against uninjured skin on my arm, clearly testing pain response, and though it stings sharply, I force myself to remain still, watching the readouts shift on the screen above me, rather than focusing on the discomfort. Pain threshold remains stable despite repeated stimulation, the scientist reports, sounding almost baffled. No significant drop in cognitive function observed. The Queen, still watching closely, tilts her head slightly. Ask him, she says, whether all humans possess this level of tolerance, or whether he has been specifically trained for it. The silver scientist turns to me, repeating the question through its translator, though I already heard the Queen ask it directly. I think carefully before answering, aware that this question matters more than almost anything else I've said since arriving on this ship. The truth is, I have no idea whether I'm unusually tough compared to other humans. I've never been tested like this before. I've never had reason to think about my own pain tolerance or healing speed as anything other than normal. But I also understand, with a clarity that surprises me, that the answer I give here might shape how this entire encounter ends, not just for me, but potentially for every human who comes after me. I'm not special, I say again, keeping my voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of my body. I'm not a soldier. I'm not trained for combat or pain. I'm just a survey technician who got unlucky enough to be on the wrong ship at the wrong time. If I can handle this, it's because this is normal for us. Not because I'm different from everyone else back home. The chamber goes quiet again, and this time I watch the reaction ripple outward more visibly. Guards shifting uneasily, scientists exchanging glances, the Queen's many eyes narrowing as she processes the weight of what I've just told her. She steps back from the table slowly, her expression, as much as I can read it, shifting into something heavier, more serious than anything I've seen from her yet. If this is truly ordinary for your species, she says, her voice quieter now, almost thoughtful, then we have grossly underestimated what we are dealing with. She turns to her commander, the violet-plated figure who has remained silent near the door throughout the entire examination, and speaks rapidly in their native language, low and urgent. I can't understand the words, but I understand the tone, the same uneasy mixture of caution and alarm I noticed back in the throne room, except stronger now, sharper. The commander nods and moves quickly toward the exit, and I watch the Queen turn back toward me one final time before following. Her many eyes hold mine for a long moment, and when she speaks again, her voice carries a weight that settles deep into my chest. Rest, human, she says. We are not finished learning what your kind is capable of. She leaves the chamber, guards falling into step behind her, and the heavy doors seal shut with a low hiss, leaving me alone with the remaining scientists and the quiet hum of their instruments still tracking every beat of my heart. I lie there on the table, wrists and ankles still bound, pain still pulsing steadily through my side, and stare up at the strange glowing ceiling above me, trying to process everything that's just happened. A few hours ago, I was an ordinary technician, running quiet survey routes through empty space. Now I'm lying on an alien examination table, having apparently just convinced the ruler of what seems to be a vast interstellar empire that her entire understanding of my species might be dangerously wrong. I don't know whether that's going to save my life or end it. But for the first time since the alarms first tore me from sleep aboard the Meridian, I let myself believe, just slightly, that I might actually survive this. Somewhere beyond these walls, an empire built on conquest is beginning to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the fragile, short-lived species it just captured. And I am, quite by accident, the reason why. I don't know how much time passes before the doors open again. There are no windows in the examination chamber, no clocks, nothing to measure the hours, except the slow, throbbing rhythm of pain in my side, and the occasional shift change among the scientists monitoring me. When the doors finally slide open, it isn't the Queen who enters first, but the violet-plated commander, moving with a stiff, hurried urgency that wasn't there before. He approaches the table and begins unlocking my restraints himself, his clawed hands surprisingly careful as he works the mechanisms free. I sit up slowly, wincing as the movement pulls at my healing wound, and watch him step back to give me room. "You will come with me," he says through his translator. "The Queen requires your presence again." I rub my wrists where the restraints left faint marks and slide off the table, testing my legs before trusting them fully. The pain has dulled slightly since the last time I stood, though it's still there, a constant reminder of everything that's happened since this nightmare began. "Where's Captain Voss?" I ask, my voice rough from hours of silence. "The woman who was captured with me." The commander hesitates, and for a moment, I think he won't answer. But then he says, "She is being held separately, unharmed. The Queen wishes to speak with you first." That's not exactly reassuring, but it's more information than I expected to get, so I nod and follow him out of the chamber, flanked by 2 guards who keep a careful distance from me now, more careful than they were during my initial capture. I notice the difference immediately, the way their postures have shifted from casual dominance to something closer to caution, and despite everything, despite the exhaustion and pain still weighing on every part of my body, I feel a small, sharp flicker of something like control returning to me. We move back through the towering corridors toward the main hall, and as we walk, I notice something new. Small groups of the ship's crew pause as we pass, their many eyes tracking me with open curiosity, some of them murmuring quietly to each other in their clicking language. Word has clearly spread about whatever happened during my examination, and I can't help but wonder exactly what version of events has reached them. The doors to the throne hall open, and I'm led back into the same vast chamber where this entire ordeal began, though it feels different now, filled with more guards and advisors than before, all of them watching me with the same mixture of curiosity and unease I've been growing used to. The Queen stands at the center of the platform, not seated on any kind of throne, but standing with a posture I read now as tense, alert, the posture of someone bracing for news they don't want to hear. When she sees me enter, her many eyes fix on me instantly, and I feel that same strange pressure behind my own eyes, though it feels different this time, less invasive, and more like she's simply watching closely. "Human," she says, and her voice carries none of the imperious command it held during our first meeting. "I have consulted with my fleet commanders across several vessels since our last conversation." I stop a respectful distance from the platform, unsure exactly what response she's looking for, so I simply wait, meeting her gaze as steadily as I can manage. "Your physical readings have been shared across our medical networks," she continues. "The response from my scientists has been consistent. None of them have encountered anything like what we observed during your examination, not among any of the several dozen species currently under our dominion." She descends a step from the platform, moving closer, and I notice the guards around the chamber shift slightly, tensing as she approaches me directly, as though even they're uncertain how this conversation might unfold. "I must ask you something directly," she says, "and I require an honest answer. Is your species inherently hostile? Do you possess this level of resilience because your history is one of constant warfare, constant violence against other species as well as your own?" The question catches me off guard, and I take a moment to consider it carefully, aware that whatever I say next could shape how she views not just me, but every human who might ever encounter her people in the future. "We've fought wars," I say slowly, choosing my words with care. "Plenty of them, throughout our history. But that's not the same as being inherently hostile. Most of what shaped us wasn't fighting other people. It was surviving everything else: disease, hunger, predators. Environments that tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways before we ever had the chance to build anything resembling civilization." The Queen's many eyes narrow slightly, processing this, and I press on, feeling a strange kind of momentum building behind my words now. "We're not looking for a fight," I continue. "We didn't ask to be pulled out of our own space and dragged onto your ship. But if a fight is what you're worried about, I think what you should really be asking yourself is what a species like mine looks like when it's actually pushed into one." The silence that follows stretches long enough that I start to wonder if I've overstepped, said something that might get me killed rather than respected. But then the Queen straightens, and something in her posture shifts, a subtle recalculation taking place behind those many glowing eyes. "You speak boldly for someone still bleeding from an unhealed wound," she says, though there's less hostility in the observation than I expect. "Where I'm from," I reply, "boldness isn't something you wait to earn once you're safe. It's something you use to survive long enough to get there." Another long pause follows, and this time I watch the Queen turn slightly, addressing not just me, but the gathered advisors and commanders filling the chamber around us. "Broadcast this exchange across the fleet network," she orders. "Every commander, every scientist, currently studying human physiology, needs to understand what we are truly encountering here. A murmur ripples through the room, and I realize with a growing sense of unease that this conversation isn't staying contained to this single chamber anymore. Whatever is happening here is being shared, spread outward across however many ships and outposts and territories this empire controls, and I am, for better or worse, at the center of it. The Queen turns back to me, studying my face with renewed intensity. "You claim to be unremarkable among your kind," she says. "An ordinary member of your species, not a warrior, not specially trained for endurance or combat." "That's right," I confirm. "Then consider what that means for us," she says, and for the first time I hear something in her voice that sounds almost like genuine concern rather than calculated threat assessment. "If an ordinary member of your species can withstand what you have withstood, remain conscious, remain coherent, continue to think and speak clearly, despite an injury that would incapacitate nearly every species we have ever catalogued, then what does that suggest about the ones among you who are specially trained? The ones who dedicate their lives to combat and endurance rather than simple survey work?" I don't have a good answer for that, mostly because I've genuinely never thought about it in those terms before. Back home, resilience isn't something we talk about as remarkable. It's just background noise, something we take for granted, the same way we take gravity or sunlight for granted. But hearing the Queen lay it out so clearly, framing my ordinary endurance as a potential preview of something far more dangerous, I start to understand why the mood in this chamber has shifted so dramatically since my capture. "I think," I say carefully, "that you'd be better off finding out through conversation than through conflict." The Queen's many eyes hold mine for a long, tense moment, and I can feel the weight of every guard and advisor in the chamber watching this exchange unfold, waiting to see how she'll respond to a captured, wounded human speaking to her with something dangerously close to equal footing. Finally, she straightens fully, her massive frame casting a long shadow across the platform, and when she speaks again, her voice carries a new gravity, a seriousness that settles heavily over the entire chamber. "I have conquered 11 species since taking this throne," she says. "Every one of them, upon first contact, showed clear physical and behavioral indicators of what they would become under pressure: fear, panic, physical collapse in the face of injury or threat. It allowed us to calculate risk accurately, to understand exactly what level of force would be required to bring each species under our dominion, with minimal cost to my own forces." She pauses, studying me with an intensity that makes the hair on the back of my neck rise. "You have shown me none of those things," she continues. "Instead, you have shown me a species that continues functioning, continues thinking clearly, continues speaking with confidence, even while grievously wounded, and completely at our mercy. I do not know how to calculate the risk that represents. And that human frightens me more than any weapon your species might possess." The admission hangs in the air, heavy and unexpected, and I realize that I'm witnessing something I never anticipated when I woke up to alarms tearing through the meridian. I'm watching the ruler of an interstellar empire admit fear, openly, in front of her entire court, because of nothing more than the simple fact that I refuse to fall down. I think of Captain Voss, held somewhere else in this massive ship, and of everyone back home who has no idea any of this is happening. I think of every survey mission, every quiet, ordinary human doing ordinary work across the growing edges of our small, fragile stretch of colonized space, none of them aware that somewhere out here, their entire species is being reevaluated by beings powerful enough to have conquered 11 worlds before ever encountering us. "You don't have to be afraid of us," I say finally, keeping my voice steady despite the weight of everything unfolding around me. "But you should probably stop thinking of us as something you can simply take." The Queen is silent for a long moment, and then, slowly, she nods, a small, deliberate motion that ripples outward through the gathered guards and advisors like a signal they've all been waiting for. "Then perhaps," she says quietly, "it is time we spoke as equals, rather than as conqueror and captive." The chamber falls into a heavy, uncertain silence, and I stand there, wounded, exhausted, and utterly unprepared for the direction this conversation has just taken, watching the balance of power in this entire encounter shift beneath my feet, like sand pulled out by a retreating wave. Whatever happens next, I understand with sudden, sharp clarity that nothing about this encounter is going to end the way either of us expected when I first stumbled, bleeding, into that shuttle bay. The Queen orders the chamber cleared of all but her closest advisors, and I watch as guards usher out row after row of curious onlookers, until only a handful of figures remain, the violet-plated commander among them, standing close to the platform, with an expression I still can't fully read. She gestures for me to sit, and a low seat is brought forward, something clearly built for a different anatomy, but functional enough that I lower myself into it carefully, grateful for the chance to take the weight off legs that have been shaking slightly for the last several minutes without my full permission. I want Captain Voss brought here, I say, before the Queen can speak again. If we're going to talk, I want her here too. She's my commanding officer. She deserves to be part of this. The Queen studies me for a moment, and I brace for refusal, but instead, she nods to the commander, who turns and disappears through a side door without a word. A few minutes later, he returns with Captain Voss beside him, her wrists no longer bound, though her expression remains guarded, wary, taking in the changed atmosphere of the chamber with visible confusion. "Ethan," she says, as she's led closer, relief flooding her voice, despite the tension still evident in her posture. "What's happening?" "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admit, "but I think we might actually be negotiating." The captain's eyebrows rise sharply, and she glances toward the Queen, who watches the exchange with quiet, careful attention. "Your crewman has demonstrated something my people did not anticipate," the Queen says, addressing the captain directly now. "A resilience that challenges every assumption we have built regarding your species' vulnerability." Captain Voss straightens slightly, some of her old command presence returning to her posture despite everything we've been through. "So what does that mean for us?" she asks. "Are we prisoners, bargaining chips, or something else?" The Queen is quiet for a long moment, her many eyes shifting between the two of us, and when she finally speaks, her voice carries a weight I haven't heard from her before, something closer to genuine consideration than command. "When my people first began expanding beyond our home system, many generations ago, we encountered species who could be conquered swiftly, absorbed into our empire with minimal resistance," she says. "Over time, this became simply how we understood the universe to function. Strength conquers weakness. It is the natural order we have always known." She turns to look directly at me, and something in her expression softens slightly, though the intensity in her many eyes remains undiminished. "But your species does not fit neatly into that order," she continues. "You are not strong in the ways we typically measure strength. Your technology lags behind ours considerably. Your ships are fragile, your weapons unremarkable, and yet here you sit, wounded, exhausted, entirely within my power, and you speak to me, not as prey pleading for mercy, but as someone negotiating from a position you clearly believe you still hold." "Because I do believe that," I say honestly. "Not because I think I can fight my way out of this room, I know I can't, but because I think you've already realized that conquering my species would cost you more than you're prepared to pay." The Queen's eyes narrow slightly, though there's no anger in the expression, only careful calculation. "Explain." I take a breath, gathering my thoughts, aware that this might be the most important conversation of my life, one that could shape the future of every human who comes after me. "You've built an empire on quick, efficient conquest," I say slowly. "Species that break easily, that surrender once the cost of resistance becomes clear. That works because most species, understandably, value survival over pointless resistance. But you've just spent the last several hours discovering that my species doesn't process pain, injury, or fear the way your previous conquest did. We don't break easily, and if a single, ordinary, untrained survey technician can walk through your ship bleeding and still stand here negotiating with you directly, I think you already understand what an entire species built that way might be capable of if you decided to force the issue." The chamber falls silent, and I watch the weight of my words settle over the gathered advisors, over the captain beside me, over the Queen herself, whose posture has grown noticeably stiffer since I began speaking. "You are suggesting a war with your species would prove costly beyond acceptable measure," she says finally. "I'm suggesting you don't have to find out," I reply. "There's another option here, one that doesn't involve either of us losing anything." The Queen studies me for a long, tense moment, and then, slowly, she turns to her commander, murmuring something quiet in their native language. The commander nods and steps back, disappearing once more through the side door, and I glance at Captain Voss, who watches the exchange with cautious hope beginning to replace the fear still lingering in her eyes. "What option do you propose?" the Queen asks finally, turning her full attention back to me. "Diplomacy," I say simply. "A real conversation between your empire and mine. Not conquest, not war, just an honest exchange between two civilizations, who clearly have a great deal to learn from each other. You get to understand humanity, without risking a conflict that could cost you more than any conquest is worth. And we get to avoid becoming another entry on the long list of species you mentioned earlier." The Queen is quiet for a long moment, her many eyes distant, clearly weighing considerations far beyond anything I can fully understand from my position in this chamber. Finally, she nods slowly, a deliberate, weighty motion. "I will need to consult with the wider council," she says. "This is not a decision I can make alone, regardless of the authority I hold, but I am prepared to recommend exactly what you have proposed." Relief floods through me so suddenly that I feel my shoulders sag slightly, the accumulated tension of the last several hours finally beginning to release its grip. Beside me, Captain Voss lets out a slow breath, and I catch the faint beginning of a smile pulling at the corner of her mouth, the first I've seen since this entire ordeal began. "There is one more matter," the Queen says, and something in her tone makes me tense again slightly, unsure what's coming next. "Your wound. It should be properly treated now, regardless of how remarkably your body has managed on its own. I will not have it said that we allowed a potential ally to suffer needlessly under our care." She gestures, and the silver-plated scientist from the examination chamber steps forward, carrying a small case of medical instruments I don't recognize but which look, at least, gentler than anything I've encountered so far aboard this ship. As the scientist begins carefully cleaning and treating my wound, applying some kind of cool, soothing substance that immediately begins easing the sharp ache that's been my constant companion for hours, the Queen continues watching me with an expression that has shifted entirely from the cold, calculating curiosity of our first meeting into something closer to genuine respect. "Tell me something, human," she says quietly, as the scientist works. "Are all humans as willing as you to speak this boldly to someone holding complete power over their life?" I consider the question carefully before answering, thinking of everyone back home, of every stubborn, resilient person I've ever known, of a species built through countless generations of refusing to simply lie down and accept whatever fate the universe seemed determined to hand them. "I think most of us would surprise you," I say honestly. "Not because we're fearless, we're not, but because giving up has never really been something our species does well, even when giving up would probably be the easier choice." The Queen is quiet for a long moment, processing this, and then, slowly, something shifts in her expression that I can only describe as a kind of weary respect, the look of someone who has just realized the universe is far larger and stranger than they previously understood. "Then perhaps," she says softly, "the greatest miscalculation my people have made was assuming that strength must always look the way we expect it to." The treatment finishes, and the scientist steps back, leaving my side wrapped in some kind of cool, breathable material that immediately begins easing the deep ache that's persisted since the initial attack. I flex my shoulder carefully, testing the range of motion, surprised at how much better it already feels. The Queen rises fully from where she's been seated, her massive frame once more casting a long shadow across the chamber, and when she speaks again, her voice carries out across the room with renewed authority, though this time it feels less like the command of a conqueror, and more like the declaration of someone charting an entirely new course. "Prepare a vessel," she orders her commander. "These humans will be returned to their people, along with a formal request for dialogue between our civilizations. I will personally oversee the negotiations that follow." Captain Voss turns to me, disbelief and relief mingling openly on her face, and for the first time since the alarms first tore us from sleep aboard the Meridian, I let myself feel something other than fear or grim determination. I let myself feel, however cautiously, something close to hope. As guards move to escort us from the chamber, the Queen calls out once more, and I turn back to find her watching me with an expression that, for all its alien strangeness, I recognize instantly as genuine curiosity, tempered now with something like respect. "I do not know yet whether your species will become allies or rivals to my empire," she says, "but I know now that we were wrong to assume you could simply be conquered like everything that came before you. That's probably the smartest thing anyone said to me since I woke up on this ship, I reply, and something almost like amusement flickers across her many-eyed face, the closest thing to a smile I've seen from her yet. As we're led from the chamber, back through the towering corridors toward whatever vessel will carry us home, I find myself thinking not about the danger I've survived, but about everything that happens next. About the conversations that will unfold between two vastly different civilizations, conversations sparked entirely by one ordinary, wounded human who simply refused to fall down when every rule of biology said he should. We didn't win this encounter through strength, or weapons, or clever strategy. We won it through something far simpler, something woven so deeply into what it means to be human that most of us never even think to notice it. We survived. We kept moving. We refused to give the universe the satisfaction of watching us break. And somewhere behind me, in a chamber built for conquerors, an empire that has never known defeat is quietly beginning to understand that some species were never meant to be conquered at all. They were only ever meant to be met.